Over the past year, I have been doing a lot of research, and I discovered if I could go back, I probably would have been a neuroscientist instead of a CPA. And now I'm, CPA turned trainer consultant and what I call champion of fearless inclusion. And what I've learned about our brain processes, it's really been transformative for me. And, the world is moving faster, business is getting more complicated. The workplace experience, I mean, the diversity in our profession alone, it's not just the CPA anymore. There are a number of specializations, there are a number of licenses and credentials. And so all of this, as business becomes more complicated, means we need more tools, refined tools, new tools and practices to manage and lead our organizations to success. And so one of those tools is mindfulness. As you move into management and then into leadership positions, things just get busier and the noise, if you will, gets louder. And I don't say that in a bad way. Businesses need managers and leaders to facilitate, coordinate, direct, and inspire. We set an example and a living example. What we say, what we do, how we behave, that is what signals to people how they should say, do, and behave. Mindfulness has been proven to help leaders be more deliberate, ethical, and effective decision makers. Now, this isn't to fix what I'm suggesting here. What we're going to talk about is mindfulness as an enhancement, if you will. You know the saying, when we know better, we do better. And this is one of those things. Sometimes slowing down helps us speed up, if you will. I know that sounds strange. So I'm Jana Etienne. I am a certified diversity executive. And as I mentioned before, my work centers on something called fearless inclusion, which I define as the freedom to be yourself and the create space for others to do the same. I develop trainings and workshops and facilitate conversations and programs really organized around helping participants connect mindfulness and self-awareness to our daily actions and words, the goal of which is to foster greater awareness, understanding, and a collective intention in our organizations to create spaces where people can just simply be who they are, do what they do, how they do, and what I call allow our superpowers to rise. So what is mindfulness? How about we start there? I always like to do definitions, but before I actually look at the definition, I just want to address that there are a lot of misconceptions about what mindfulness is. And in order to understand how it ties to our decision making, we need to start by really getting clarity on what we mean when we say mindfulness. And then I'll also look at some examples of how it's used in the wild, so to speak. And by that, I mean, how does mindfulness show up at school, at work, in different places in our lives besides what some people think is, sitting back, meditating. All right, Vaughn, let's go ahead and do our first survey. The question that I'd like to start with is, I don't know what numbers they are in the system. Fill in the blank. Let's do that one, Vaughn. Fill in the blank. All mindfulness requires what? Now, I am going to figure out why this poll is open. I want to invite you all, as we go along, use your Q&A to share your thoughts, as well as ask questions. I'll try to take them as we go. I usually like to do that to make it more of a conversation than just a push of information. So I am going to figure out why that poll is open.
And Jana, I'll go ahead and move everything into priority.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
My Q&A window, I open it, then it closes. Then I open it, then it closes. So folks, this is going to be fun today. Can I just say?
All right. I do have that first poll open. It looks like we've got a whole bunch of people voting right now. That's fantastic. So we keep our polls open for about 60 seconds, allow you to get your votes in for your credit. And if your poll is not showing, sometimes the circles to the left of the answer are really faint to see. So just click to that imaginary circle to the left, and that should register your response. And then click submit for your answer. And Jana, it looks like we've got a majority of the responses in, and most people are saying all of the above.
With surprise.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm a CPA, and back in the day when I took the CPA exam, it was multiple choice. I won't go into the other trauma around it, but all of the above is usually a trick question because nothing is all of the above or none of the above. But in this case, it is all of the above. So thank you all for participating in that poll. It does require time. It does require space, and space might not be physical space. It might be emotional or psychological space. Haha. It might be equipment, for example. Oh, I should have brought one in here. You might need a block or a mat or a towel for yoga. Practice, because nothing about this is a one and done. This is a continual practice of growth, as we're going to talk about. All right, so back to definitions. Let's go ahead and define mindfulness then. Mindfulness, according to Merriam-Webster, is the practice of maintaining a non-judgmental state of heightened or complete awareness of one's thoughts, emotions, or experiences on a moment-to-moment basis. In other words, it's noticing what's happening right now in our minds and in our bodies. This is sometimes used as a therapy to lower stress, which we'll talk about. It can help us interrupt the sense of worry that we have. I don't know about you, but sometimes I get this song in my head or some music is playing and it won't go away. Sometimes it's a phrase that tends to repeat. I've had things like a rhythm, maybe some percussions and some other sounds going on in there. It's what I call an earworm. And it just hangs around and I find it distracting. And I've actually used different mindfulness practices to make those go away and even to fall asleep. So one of the things that's important here is that we all believe we're very intentional, we're deliberate, we're conscious in what we do all day, day to day, every day. And the reality is 95% of what we do all day is automatic. And so mindfulness helps us sort of snap back into the moment, kind of like, we're daydreaming and then you snap back into the moment. But it's a more intentional way to do that. Now, here is a really interesting story. I found this back, I think it was 2016 or something like that. This is a school in Baltimore. I actually live in Maryland and Baltimore. I was born in Baltimore, coincidentally. Hi to all of you joining from Maryland. Instead of sending kids to the principal's office or to detention when they were struggling to behave, let's just say, they sent them to what they call the mindful moment room. They decorated this room to create the sense of calm with lamps and decorations, plush purple pillows, according to the way they described it in this article. And what they asked the kids to do is to just go through practices, meditation practices like breathing, or mindfulness practices like breathing or meditation. And the goal was to help them calm down and recenter. They were also encouraged to talk about what happened. And it eventually expanded to include after-school yoga. The results were quite, well, as the title says, stunning. Kids meditated in silence. Teachers and parents were able to invite kids to sit down and breathe. They were able to practice anywhere. They had a holiday party and they asked the kids to meditate before opening gifts. They didn't think it would happen, but the kids did. They did that. Kids started to co-teach sessions. And in the year the article was published, the principal reported in that article that they had had 0 suspensions so far that year. And then there was another high school that had adopted a mindfulness program, and they saw suspension rates drop and attendance increase. So there are very real results. And this isn't exactly like causation. You meditate and therefore you go to school. Or I meditate and therefore I make a better decision. But what it does is it's that practice that helps us get into a different space so that we can behave in the way we mean to behave. We can show up the way we intend to show up. Now, this is also true in the workplace. There are quite a number of examples. I just picked a few out. Google actually has something called Search Inside Yourself. This is a program that was internal for employees. It was a mindfulness program to teach emotional intelligence, help their managers manage stress. So they wanted to help increase and boost resilience through meditation and related types of practices and exercises. This program actually expanded due to popularity. There's actually now a leadership institute. I think it's called Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, which is pronounced silly as an acronym because that they didn't want it to be too serious, but it was around doing exactly what we're talking about today, developing skills of mindfulness. The one that I thought was most powerful was the Hospital for Special Surgery. And in that hospital, they started to understand and implement mindfulness in a number of ways across their clinical practice. So it was doctors practicing mindfulness. I know I saw a television series on Netflix around a doctor performing very complex surgery. And in the operating room, they showed the surgeon and all of the staff pause and, just acknowledge the significance and importance of the moment, see and recognize the patient, and approach that surgery with intention. And in this hospital, they also talked about how meditation and mindfulness can reduce pain, boost healing, shorten recovery times. The stuff, like I said, out in the wild is pretty impressive stuff. So how does this impact us in terms of decision-making? Well, what does decision-making involve? Analysis of data, we collect input from others, we have to look at the situation and the context, but there's also other things involved. Personalities, personal insecurities. Anybody ever heard of imposter syndrome? Pressures, they could be real pressures. I have a deadline coming up, or imagined pressures. I need to show up a particular way so others perceive me as ... competent, engaged, committed, and so on. Their politics, corporate culture, power dynamics. And then there's calm, clear-headedness, and deliberation that's required, whether it's either of those types of elements, objective or subjective play. And mindfulness, what it does is it helps us tap into personal values and our personal code of ethics as we navigate the decision-making process. So what are the steps of mindfulness? There are 3 basic principles at play here. First is noticing what's happening in real time. The second is that snapping out of it, that's bringing things into our consciousness by interrupting non-conscious. I don't want to say subconscious or unconscious. It's more about all of the things that we aren't conscious of, but we're doing, and bringing that into our awareness. And then what this does is it creates space to be intentional. Being intentional and having good intent aren't exactly the same thing. Most of us operate with good intent, but don't realize that we might have said or done something that isn't accordance or in alignment with our intent. If you've ever said, "That's not what I intended," you have a sense of what I'm talking about. All right, let me do a quick pop over to the Q&A so I can see. Somebody says, I have a poster in my workspace that says what you just mentioned. Okay, I should have read that because I don't know what I just mentioned, but slowing down is sometimes the best way to speed up. There you go. Thank you. All right, so let's walk through these then. Notice in real time. What am I talking about here? Well, if you've ever done one of my programs on unconscious bias training, this topic comes up a lot in a lot of different ways because it's at the root and the heart of my work. And it's something I call flying on autopilot. And flying on autopilot is exactly what it means. It means you've set something in motion, you've established a routine or a pattern or a habit, you intuitively know how to do something, and so you just do it. And this is a beautiful, powerful way that our brains have evolved. It is why we have become these highest form of, we have this analytical thinking, the ability to speak in a language that other animals don't have in the same way we do. All of that complexity requires the ability to do things automatically. But it also means that it can be difficult for us to interrupt that process. And so being grounded in the moment, being impartial and noticing that we're having thoughts, recognizing that what's happening in here might be a reaction to what's happening out here, or might be completely disconnected to what's happening out here. All of these things are important in terms of practicing mindfulness. All of these are skills we're going to have to be able to draw on in order to make really good decisions, being thoughtful, deliberate, and effective. So I'm going to use an example. Let's use the example of road rage. So you're driving along, somebody cuts you off in the road, or who knows what happens. We're going to not talk about the things that come out of our mouths. What I want us to think about is what might be happening in real time and noticing that. So you notice like you're actually getting angry. And how does that look? You're gripping the wheel or you've hit the gas. Anybody ever find that they've sped up because somebody around them did something? So you've hit the gas or you're, clenching your teeth, that kind of thing. So noticing what's happening is noticing that I'm doing those things. All right. Then the next one, number 2, is interrupting those non-conscious thoughts. So this is about being deliberate. But to do that, we have to notice that we're being reactive. And so that allows us to choose how we want to respond. In the road rage example, then, I'm getting angry. So how do I interrupt that? Maybe I just take a breath. I'm gripping the wheel. How do I interrupt that? I relax my hands. Acceleration, I ease my foot off the gas. If I'm clenching my teeth, I stop. These things sound silly to say, but in reality, these aren't things that most of us will do without actually consciously choosing to do them. One of the most powerful things about this is this can actually help us interrupt some bad habits because now we're noticing that we're doing them. Simply through mindfulness, you will develop a broader sense of self-awareness. It's a good thing. It's a bad thing. Self-awareness is great, except for the fact that now you're self-aware and you have to do something about it. And I might be speaking from personal experience there. But so interrupting those non-conscious thoughts really empowers us or puts us in a position to be able to do that. Now, the third one is leading with intention. So what all of this does, noticing what's happening, I'm getting angry, choosing to interrupt that by maybe unclenching the wheel, taking my foot off of the gas. Now, what do? How do I lead with intention in that example? Well, I had a story where I had a traumatic thing happen. My brother was babysitting my son while I was at my year-end tax update training. I was about 30 minutes away from home. And he calls me in a panic because my son had fallen down the stairs in his walker. And I could hear my son crying in the background. My brother was not hysterical, but he was clearly upset. And I'm like, call 911 because this can be a very dangerous accident. And I hopped in my car and I drove home. And I drove home. They call it like a bat out of hell. I was driving. I wasn't driving very kindly. And what I learned from that, I wanted people to get out of my way. I was honking my horn. I was tailgating people. Once I actually drove up on the shoulder to get around a car. And what I took from that, and I'm sharing this because of leading with intention, is that what I've started to do now, and it took a while to get there, but I do it now regularly, is when somebody cuts me off in traffic, getting angry, I might be my initial reaction, but take a breath. And then what I try to do is extend empathy. And I think this person's driving this way. I hope they get wherever they need to get to okay. And I hope everything's okay. Maybe they're being a jerk, but I don't care. I'm not projecting that onto them. So I choose to, it says here, mindset of curiosity, but where I'm going with that is a spinoff of that, which is I'm going to be empathetic. Curiosity in that I'm going to be open to that. This person has something else going on. I'm not here to judge. It's how I want to show up. Now, the other things I talked about, gripping the wheel, so the relaxing the hands. Well, what about leading with intention? I'm going to wiggle my fingers and toes. I'm going to move my body in a way that brings me back into this moment. Taking my foot off the gas is one thing, but consciously slowing down and noticing my speed. Clenching my teeth. How about I force myself to smile? Now, that might sound a little silly, but studies have actually shown that when you smile, even a forced smile can actually help you feel happier. Researchers were asked to do something. I don't know why I was going to do this. Get a pencil, put it in your teeth and clench it and make your smile, force a smile. And yes, thank you for asking. My son was perfectly fine. Believe it or not. I don't know how that happened, but he was fine. So they were actually forced to smile. And what the data tells us or told them in that research is that the people reported feeling better. So smiling will elevate your mood. It can create a sense of well-being. It supposedly induces more pleasure than chocolate. I'm not sure about that. And so maybe this is a chicken and egg thing. And this is how I want you to think about mindfulness. Smiling can lead to helping you feel better. You don't feel good, you smile, and now you feel better. Or you feel good, so you smile. And that smile reinforces the good feelings. And so how do you do these things? How can you lead with intention? It's really about thinking about strategies so that you can show up the way you want to show up. So where are we? All right. I want to talk about and walk through then, how does this directly impact our decision-making abilities? So the first area here is clarity. And so what mindfulness helps us do is it helps us with every different stage of the process of making decisions. So the first one, clarity, this is about framing the decision. This is about recognizing that a decision needs to be made, getting clear on the objectives, thinking through our different options, weighing the pros, the cons, the impacts, alternative scenarios, alternative responses. It allows us to interrupt irrational decision making. There's something called sunk cost bias, and I'm going to explain that here in a moment. But the sunk cost bias, it allows us to mitigate the likelihood that we will fall victim to that bias, if you will. And then it also helps us with the ethical parts of the decision making. And so what's important here is that when we talk about clarity, when we practice mindfulness, slowing down our minds, noticing the reactivity, thinking about intentionally how we want to show up, part of that noticing allows us to pay attention to the environment, back to the road rage. We might not have, without really thinking it through, recognized what's causing us to have a reaction in the car, because maybe it's not this overt road rage incident where somebody cut you off in traffic, but what if it is a violation of what feels like a sense of fairness, because something as simple as they changed lanes in front of you and they didn't turn on their turning signal and it caught you by surprise. And so you're finding that you're having the same reaction to that. So when you have a sense of clarity around it, around what's going on, what it is that you need to be making decisions on, it's that same idea that noticing and recognizing that something has happened that's activated thinking in my head. So I can't get clear. I'm struggling to look at my different options. I can't even identify pros and cons. I'm super hyper focused on the pros and not really weighing the cons or even bringing them into my analysis. Or this might be reinforcing this tendency we have to gravitate toward the status quo. Now, the quote, I know I'm going a little out of order than the slides you have in your handout. But this quote is around that sunk cost bias. That sunk cost bias is kind of what happens or what causes us to keep treading water or maintaining the status quo. Or if you've ever been in a situation where you see that you're heading down the wrong path, or you can see this decision led you to the wrong place and you probably should change course. But at this point, we've put in enough time, we've put in a lot of effort. We don't want to change course because it feels like changing course will be more disruptive than sticking with what you now know might be a bad idea. And so what's really interesting about the research that was done here, there's actually the papers called Debiasing the Mind Through Meditation, Mindfulness, and the Sunk Cost Bias. And what they found was that mindfulness helped people focus on the present, let go of what happened in the past, as well as being hyper-focused on what's going to happen in the future, just thinking about the now. They set up a series of experiments and they had people make decisions. And some of those decisions, based on the design of the question and the decision they were asked, would reinforce this doubling down. Look, we've been here, we've put the money in, let's just keep going. Or they would demonstrate an ability to reimagine, rethink, possibly change direction. And then they asked half of the participants to listen to a 15-minute focused breathing guided meditation. And then what they found after that was those who listened to the meditation were more likely to resist or overcome this bias. The same thing happened when they asked people to take a survey, and they had to do a 10-item quick decision-making inventory sort of survey. Half listened to the guided meditation beforehand, and the results were consistent. The value of that short-term meditation in order to make this series of decisions was clear. They made faster, better, more effective decisions. And so mindfulness doesn't have to take a lot of time. That first survey question was really around how much time does it take, but it doesn't have to take a lot of time. And then the last element here is careful consideration. And I have careful consideration here because it's one thing to slow down the mind. It's one thing to be able to find all of the data, but then it requires us to take the time to analyze the data. Now, I have ADHD, and with ADHD comes the likelihood of either being restless, which is the hyperactive part. It shows up as restlessness sometimes in adults more than what we think of as hyperactive around kids. And then distractedness. And distractedness can be a challenge with managing attention. And I put this here because understanding the differences between automatic attention and distracted attention is really important, and mindfulness can help interrupt this. So automatic attention is where we put our attention to something versus distracted attention, which is our attention is drawn to something. Distracted attention, for example, a bird flew into my window the other day and boom, hit the window. And so it caught my attention. That is distracted attention. And if I stay there and then I get lost in any thoughts that follow that, I'm not present in the moment versus paying attention to what I'm doing, noticing something happening, and then going back to what I'm doing. So careful consideration is really about managing our intention. It's recognizing that it isn't a we are successful or we failed, but there's a spectrum here. And there's a lot of other things to consider. And so the coming to a conclusion requires us to look at stay focused, stay present, deal with those distractions. It's not that you can't be distracted. It's just that you don't want the distractions to create this level of stress or pressure or heighten an internal sense of anxiety. And we want to be able to tap into not only our intuition and our past experiences, but we also want to make sure that we're behaving in a way that is consistent with our values and with our beliefs, the values of this organization, the goals of this team, or knowing the impact or the importance of this decision. So mindfulness allows us to look at all of these factors, identify possible discrepancies, and then make a decision that weighs all of these trade-offs in a way that is effective and ethical and fair. Now, I put content and context here because content is around the data that we're looking at. Context is the circumstances of that data. And what mindfulness helps us to do is look at those two more carefully and consider things like recognizing that there might be some emotion to this decision. And so I have to balance being rational and analytical with understanding that there's also emotional inputs that I might need to bring into this decision. Mindfulness allows us and creates space for that to happen. So in the Q&A I see here, one of my favorite words is pivot. I use this concept when something is not quite right and I need to change directions. Oh, I love that, pivot. Another person says, sometimes you need to choose joy and positivity instead of negativity. We're actually going to look at this acceptance meditation in a moment, and I'll show you that. Future class idea, tips for accountants with ADHD, in the works. Hang on with me there. Thank you for that. All right, so where are we going? The last thing I want to talk about here, oh, sorry, I had two more things. Improved communication. And I've actually started to touch on this a little bit. But the biggest point here, in the interest of time, the biggest point here is the verbal, the nonverbal, and the unconscious communication. Most of our communication is nonverbal. And so calming down our mind, calming down our energy, quieting our energy, being able to sort of sit still and take in the moment and minimize our reactivity is critical, because everybody is noticing all of this. It's almost like as we vibrate on a shared frequency in an organization. There's a rhythm, there's a connection, there's an energy that we share, and positive energy boosts positive energy, and we don't have to say anything for that to happen. And so this is what's important. The other piece about the communication is that mindfulness creates the space for me to learn from feedback. That psychological safety there is important. Psychological safety is feeling safe, asking a question, disagreeing, saying I'm not sure, challenging, putting out a new idea. All of the things that are required to make good decisions, to get input, to evaluate the scenario, possibly pivot, right? Mindfulness creates the space for us to do all of those things, to make it safe to do all of those things. And I'm signaling that not just because I say, I want everybody to put an idea, this is a safe space. Well, you can't declare it a safe space. You can declare your intention for this space to be a space where people can engage. But that doesn't mean people will feel safe. That's going to fall under that more subtle nonverbal communication. And then the last piece here, this is the last piece, which is being comfortably uncomfortable. At the end of the day, mindfulness, that awareness, navigating through these difficult situations, or making very high stakes decisions, or having to make decisions that might have an impact on someone other than the impact that they want. Think giving not the best performance feedback, being honest about the feedback that you need to give, and then being able to give that feedback. Mindfulness allows us to step away from this, I need to be right, and to just, I need to make the right decision, but it's okay if I'm not necessarily right. I can stay present. I don't let the stress get to me. And if I do feel stressed, mindfulness gives me an opportunity to recover and get back to a sense of balance and psychological and emotional, mental well-being after that difficult moment is passed. Think recovering from tax season. Think getting past that reporting deadline. What do you need to do? Sometimes it's just taking a breath. All right, so let's look at some mindfulness practices day to day, because this is all great intellectually, but how does this actually show up? Well, I'm not a mindfulness expert. I have a lot of things that I do to practice mindfulness, so I'm going to throw out a couple of things for you, a couple of ideas. And I just want to start with this overarching premise, and that is you can be mindful anytime. It actually takes practice to train our brains to slow down. Because remember that 95% of the time we fly around on autopilot, we make quick decisions, business is moving very fast. If we practice, sometimes it's just 30 seconds, sometimes it's an hour. It's a number of different activities that we can do, but you can do it. When was the last time you sat down in a chair and did absolutely nothing, and didn't consider yourself being lazy or what have you, like the negative self-talk in your head? Mindfulness is going to create space for us to do that safely within ourselves, just the stories we tell ourselves. So at the end of the day, mindfulness starts with noticing so that we can interrupt that autopilot. And so it's noticing what you're reacting to, what's happening in the environment around you, how are you impacting the environment around you, and so on. An environment around you, there are a lot of things. So it could be the light, it could be all of the sound that's happening, it could be the textures. I know, for example, there's a hard edge to the bottom of my chair, and I've started to notice it, and it's starting to bother me. That's not a question of mindfulness, but that is a question of being aware of my environment and the impact all of these things might be having on the way I show up on any given day. So I'm inviting you all to think about, and I have this question up here, how are you feeling right now? I'm really grateful that you've taken an hour out of your day to join me today for this conversation. I think what it does is it helps reinforce the fact that this is something we are all recognizing is a superpower. Being able to practice mindfulness, to slow down and connect with the decisions we're making, connect with the meeting we're having right now, actually listening to the meeting, not checking my cell phone, whatever the case may be. And so I want you to think about how you're feeling right now and just check in with that. This is just a pause moment. All right, finally, we're going to get to our next polling question. The polling question is, I think it's the third one, I think. How familiar are you with these techniques? So I've dropped a bunch of techniques up here. Can we go ahead and open that poll?
Yep, I have that open right now. So this is poll number 2, everyone. So we will have 2 more polls after this. No worries. We will get to all 4 polls during the session.
We will get to them. I know people are like, is there another poll? Where's the other poll? I got you. Got you. I know.
Mindfulness. We are mindful of our polls.
We are mindful of our polls. And one of the things about one mindfulness practice, and it's a safe space rule that I've used, it's be present, be absent, but not both. And by that, I mean, I'm in this meeting and I'm going to engage in this meeting. And if for some reason I can't, an important email is coming in, I'm not feeling really well, or I've had an emotional reaction to something someone has said, then acknowledge that I am not present and be absent. I might need to turn off my camera, mute my camera, tell people in the chat, I'm stepping away, I'll be right back. I might need to, in person, step out of the room, whatever you, what have you. All right, so I'm looking at the responses. I don't know if it's closed, but for the most part, I see many of the responses. Most of these are new to them. Most of these are new to me. That's 12%. 25% said several are new to me. 52% said a few of them are new to me. And 11% said none of them are new to me. And you know what? If you have other ideas, drop them in the chat, because for the rest of this session, we're just going to look at a bunch of different techniques that you can use to be more mindful, recognizing that this mindfulness allows you to slow down and not just make right decisions, but accept the decisions of others. I know it sounds a little silly, but let's start with meditation. Meditation, the definition here, I got this one from Psychology Today. Great resource, by the way. Lots of great resources. There's a mindful a website and publication if you're interested. I could go on. And in fact, at the end of your handout, I've included a bunch of resources, articles, podcasts. There's even a link to a video on the basics of mindfulness. On the PDF itself, you can click on the link. I embedded the link there, so you can click on it and it'll open the video for you. So mindfulness is a mental exercise that trains attention and awareness, purpose, curb reactivity to our own negative thoughts, the environment around us, so that we aren't hijacked by this moment. That's what meditation is doing for us. So what does meditation look like? Well, there are a number of different techniques and practices for meditation. The picture here is what most people think about when they think of meditation. And in that picture for the school, the article about meditation in the school, you saw a little child sitting there in this, traditional meditation pose. It's one pose, but it's not the only pose, and it's not the only practice. There are themes around meditation. You can move. There's something called a walking meditation. You can be listening mindfully. There's guided imageries where you have somebody walking you through a visualization that's happening in your mind. Progressive relaxation is something that I've done to try to fall asleep. Now, I use a guided app. Now I'm going to open my phone. You don't need to see me open my phone. I don't know why I do this, but I have the Calm app. And in the Calm app, which is one of the apps that are in the resource there are a lot of them. But in that app, one of the things that I do, I have a headset, and I'll turn on the headset at night, and I'm laying in my bed and I'm following the progressive muscle relaxation as a way for me to unwind and quiet myself to fall asleep. With ADHD, sometimes it's really hard to rein in my brain. And so meditation helps with that, just simple focus. So those are a couple of different things that you can do. Now, this is the meditation I was talking about, this acceptance meditation, practice. What I love about this is that this is going through each of these statements. You can do this quickly, or you can do this take a quiet time and just reflectively go through these questions and then sit with each of those statements. So I have arrived. And what this might mean is that I'm exactly where I need to be. And sitting with that. Then you say, I am home. And this might be that there's no better place to be someplace. There's no better time to be someplace than here and now. To say I'm in the here and now recognizes the importance of this present moment. It's being fully engaged. I am happy. It recreates and affirms this state of contentment, freedom from, say, constraints of our external situations or internal situations, overthinking things. It's choosing joy in this moment. I am free is about that freedom from constraint. It's being able to make a choice in this moment. There's a quote, if you've read the book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. And he wrote in his book, and I have a quote here, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So that is all about recognizing the moment, going from distracted or from disconnected to present and aware. And in that moment, we can now choose to head in the direction that we want to go toward, to be intentional. And then the last one is in the ultimate I dwell. And so this might mean, for example, that you are recognizing that there's a deeper connection between you and a universal truth or some spiritual dimension. I don't want to make this religious. This is for what you go through as you say each of these statements and then reflect on what those mean to you. Another thing you might want to do is what I call the real-time awareness body scan. I define real-time awareness as the ability to notice your reactions, internal and external, in order to avoid being reactive and to create that space to be deliberate, to be thoughtful, and to be intentional. So this is about creating a mind-body connection. And how do you do that? Well, step one is you ask yourself, what am I thinking in this moment? What emotions am I feeling in this moment? You'd be surprised, but emotion, the language around emotion is often harder to articulate and describe. If you've ever had that, I have a feeling, I have a sense about something, but you can't find the words to that. This is really about naming those emotions. That gives you that clarity. Next one is, how is this affecting me physically? Like I'm gripping the steering wheel, I'm clenching my teeth, I am huffing and not breathing calmly, for example. And then the last one is, how is all of this affecting my behavior? I'm snapping at people. My body language, I'm just not showing up in a way that is kind to other people. That real-time awareness scan is just doing all of those little checks. And they can be 10 seconds. Or it could be the basis for a body scan meditation or anything in between. So here's one example for what does this look like in practice? So intention setting. You notice you're just kind of going through the motions. You aren't really checking into what's happening around you. You're kind of feeling a little disconnected in this moment. So what could you do? Step away from your desk, literally, like go to another room, or figuratively. One of the things that I find myself doing is I turn away from my monitors. My windows are here. There are beautiful trees outside my house. And I just look. And so I am disconnected from this, which is my desk. And then in that moment, I want to identify, I want to get back to doing this one thing. This is something that I want to finish today, or this is how I want to show up for the rest of the day. Reset, practice some self-compassion, give myself some grace. It is okay to not be okay. It is okay to have been distracted. Let's get back to work, that kind of thing. All right, what's next? Breathing exercises. So breathing exercises, there are a lot of different techniques that are available. The app that I use, the Calm app, can actually walk you through different types of breathing. There's deep breathing, which involves pulling in the lower part of your belly and your lower lungs. Because it's interesting is I think we breathe mostly in the top part of our lungs, so not using our full lungs. Box breathing is a technique of breathing a certain, so like you breathe to a count of 4, you inhale, you hold for 4, you exhale for 4, you hold for 4, and then you repeat that. I got an Apple Watch for Christmas, and there's a little mindfulness thing on here. I don't know what it's called, but then you can choose to do this practice for a couple minutes. And what the what the app does is it does this visual, and there's a haptic movement to it and a visual where there's just little remind you to just breathe in and then breathe out. And for a minute, I'm doing this because I almost feel like the visuals remind you to sort of breathe and move through this to stimulate different parts of your body or quiet other parts. So here's what I mean by just breathe. Close your eyes, turn off all your notifications, turn off your lights, lower your lights. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, just lower your gaze, and then take a couple of breaths to quiet all of those racing thoughts in your mind. It could be a actual breathing practice, or it could be just taking a few breaths. The next one I have here is, let's see, where am I? I think I went the wrong direction. Movement. Yeah, so movement. Get up and stretch. Did you know that there's such a thing as seated yoga? And there are YouTube videos for this. If you want some videos and other resources, email me. There's so much out there that you can do. Tai Chi is increasing in popularity. And so there are classes you can take, again, YouTube videos that you can just learn to practice the art of these movements that bring length, elongating the body, but also can help settle the body, which helps settle the mind. Or it might be something like, I know for some people, gardening is that activity that really helps them stay rooted in practice and quiet. Let's go ahead and open that polling question asking, do people have a mindfulness practice? I'm curious as I run through some of these. I don't know that I'm going to hit all of them, but they're here as suggestions, different things you can try. Go to open poll. So that poll is open, Vaughn?
Correct. Yes, we have that third poll up on your screens. We'll have one more following this. And I did put a few things in the priority for you that I thought were some other good examples.
Okay,
well.
Cool. I'll run through these last ones real quick and then we'll hit the Q&A.
Awesome.
And what I'm curious about is for those of you who say no, as we start to look at this, maybe you have one and you didn't think of it as a mindfulness practice, but you have a strategy or a technique that you use to calm yourself down, to help you decompress. We've all heard that word used a lot. Well, those techniques to decompress are different practices to quiet the mind, aka mindfulness. It does not have to be as formal as what we're talking about here. I have here on the slide that mindfulness yoga can be done anywhere, anytime. And the idea of mindfulness, there's even something called restorative yoga. Restorative yoga. The first time I did a restorative yoga class, I fell asleep, but that was the point, to become that relaxed. And you can do the yoga in as short as a few minutes. I'm a Pelotoner. I have a Peloton. I'm Fearlessly Me on the leaderboard. And in the Peloton app, they actually have 5-minute yoga sessions that you can do. And I've done that. Like during the day, I need to shake things off, get my body back with me, if you will. And so I'll stand right over here and do a little quick 5-minute yoga. Resetting equilibrium. I wanted this to be here because there's being centered and then there's being grounded. And those terms are often used interchangeably. And there's no right or wrong here, but the two principles are important. The way I define being centered is connecting back to who you want to be. It's quieting any negative self-talk. It's thinking about how you're showing up and the intention for how you want to show up. Connecting with purpose. Grounded for me is being present in this moment. Being aware of my body, being aware of my environment. And that connection can be how I feel. It can be where I'm in space. Am I cold? Like that kind of thing. Do I feel emotionally okay? One of the exercises or the examples here is that you're just jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting, and you're just sort of been going on firing on all cylinders. Is that the saying? So as you join your next meeting, what you might want to do is for 30 seconds, and you can invite others to join you. You'd be surprised how many people appreciate this. It feels awkward at first, but invite people to just take a moment and sort of shake it out. Wiggle your fingers and toes, maybe press your feet into the ground, roll your shoulders back and down, a few deep breaths. And what you want to invite people to do is leave that last meeting or where you just came from behind, leave it there, and trust that the next thing is coming. So you don't have to worry about that right now, just to get present in this moment. Lots of other things that you can do. I have a bunch of random things here. Focus timers. Microsoft has something called, what is it called? I think it's called their clock. And inside the clock, they have a focus timer that actually I link to my Spotify. I can set it with different durations. And what the timer does is it counts down. If it's a 50-minute focus block, it gives me 22 minutes. Ding, take a 5-minute break. Ding, get back to work. It's fantastic. And then the last one I'll leave you with, I'm going to skip mindful eating. And I just want you to take a look at this picture. And I have this picture on here because yawning is something you can do on purpose. And it helps with anxiety relief. It helps quiet. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps create and alleviate anxiety, promote a sense of calm. And you feel like it's something you can't do, but I promise you, you can yawn whenever you want. Just open your mouth. I would do it for you on camera, but I'm not, because you can open your mouth and think about where the feeling of a yawn comes from. And then, like it says on the slide, there's a slide just before this that walks you through the steps. Watch a video of someone yawning, because we all know that yawns are contagious. So watch a video of someone yawning. All right, so that's it. I'm going to leave the baby yawning up here. I'm going to pop over to the Q&A. In a stress management class, the instructor told us about keeping an orange in the freezer. And when you get anxious, take out the orange and hold it. It helps you calm down. That's an interesting idea. I like that. Other people have things like a touchstone or some object that they can actually physically touch that can help them with that. That's a nice idea. Somebody say it can be religious. Praying can be a kind of meditation. Absolutely. Some religions have prayers that are more like a chant. I know I grew up with a set of prayer beads. I still have them actually, where there's a short phrase that I will say and repeat every time I touch the bead and roll through all of those beads. It's a bit of a meditation. Nature, trees, the sun, birds, whatever can help you feel good. I often go taking my dog for a walk. There's a beautiful trail here, and we will go walking in the morning. And if I feel particularly stressed, not only do I walk, you can go down the steep hill and there's a beautiful stream, but then you got to come back up the steep hill. And there are a couple of hikes, trails where you can go up and down these hills. I will actually do some of those more challenging hikes so that there is no way I can be thinking about work or what I didn't buy at the grocery store or that thing my friend said, and I can just get present in the moment. Gratitude practice, example of mindfulness, absolutely. Somebody says their mind is quietest when they're gardening. Horseback riding would terrify me, but Donna, thank you. That outdoor activity, what brings you joy? What brings you calm? What brings you back to the moment? Mindfulness at work doesn't mean you have to be doing it at your desk. What mindfulness at work for me means, as a leader, to help us get that clarity, to help us stay present and connected, is to have some practice that we go to so that we can maintain the sense of calm or restore a sense of calm when things feel like they're getting out of hand. And if we know we have an important decision coming up or some high stakes thing is going to happen, having an active practice that you can turn to, whether it's a 30-second breathing meditation, you go out for a 10-minute walk, leaving your cell phone behind, You get up and you dance for a few minutes, whatever it is that it can help you get grounded and centered will help us all make a better decision, whether it's the actual conclusion and recommendation I need to make or the decision to speak up or stay quiet. Every type of decision can be benefited by this mindfulness and the slowing down. So I'm going to take a quick peek over here at the other things you popped in there. Journaling, they take a minute to write down their thoughts and find a random writing prompt. That's good. I actually used to keep a gratitude journal, and at the end of the day, before I went to bed, I would write down, one thing I'm grateful for today. I was grateful for today. Sometimes mentally putting on blinders helps me focus on the task at hand. Absolutely. Portal is a great app for meditation. I've not heard of that one, so thank you for sharing that. I don't know if I missed anything else in the Q&A, but we are at time. Thank you all for joining me today. And Vaughn,